we've sort of become accustomed at this point that if a person who is a Muslim commits an act of terror, right-wingers attack the entirety of Islam. It's not generally the case that when Muslims are killed in a terror attack, the politician attacks all of Islam, but today that is the case. With a senator in Australia, this is Fraser Anning, who put out a statement on full letterhead, totally available, proud to have this attributed to his name, said the entire religion of Islam is simply the violent ideology of a 6th century despot. It is the religious equivalent of fascism. And just because the followers of this savage belief were not the killers in this instance does not make them blameless. Just to be clear, he's saying that the 49 men, women, and children who were killed in this attack were not blameless for their own killing. And goes on to say, as we read in Matthew, quote, all they that take the sword shall perish by the sword, and those who follow a violent religion that calls on them to murder us cannot be too surprised when someone takes them at their word and responds in kind. Apparently missing the obvious then follow-up, well, if you believe that your violence against is justified because of their violence against you, does that not then justify their violence against you in the future? That causes the sorts of cyclical violence that has led to generational conflicts in the American South, Europe, and beyond.
Okay, so obviously we don't believe in that cyclical violence, but I've got to correct one thing, because unfortunately no one ever talks about this for fear of offending Christians, and then it allows this ideology to take hold and leads to these disastrous results, which is that Islam is somehow uniquely violent. Its text is uniquely violent. And it leads to the ideology that Muslims, since they all believe in that text, are irredeemable. And that is obviously what the senator from Australia is going towards, but even in a less sophisticated way. So read the text for yourselves. The Bible is filled to the rim with grotesque violence. So if you don't like that fact, take it out with God. But you can read it for yourself. And you could, say, oh, Cenk made me uncomfortable by telling me things that are true. And if you don't believe me, like I said, try to make it through the Old Testament. See if you can do it without vomiting, okay? And even Sam Harris, who is, I think, a huge purveyor of the idea that Muslims are uniquely irredeemable, admitted on the show that, yeah, the Old Testament is by far the most violent of the texts. Does that make all Christians or Jews violent? Of course not. Of course not. Here's another uncomfortable fact that nobody talks about. No one actually believes any of the religions. Christians don't believe the terribly violent things in the Bible, except for a few nuts, right? Muslims don't believe the violent things in the Quran. The Quran has some violent parts, and they know good Muslim folks say, no, it's a religion of peace. No, like all the religions, in their text has wonderful things about taking care of the poor and the needy, and terrible things about violence. Also true in the Old Testament, also true in the New Testament. So luckily, the overwhelming majority of Muslims take the good parts of the Quran and leave out the violence. The overwhelming majority of Christians and Jews take the good parts of the Old Testament and the New Testament and leave aside the violence. But this idea that, oh my God, did you know there's violence in the Quran? Have you ever read anything in the Bible? I defy you to go 3 pages in the Bible without running into something incredibly violent. So let's just be honest about all of the texts, and that's why I left religion. I grew up Muslim and I left it because I don't subscribe to that. It's just not true. It's just not true. So if you don't believe me, go read it, and find me one person that follows every letter of any of those books. And if you do, let's make sure to lock them up, because they are weird, insane, and prone to extreme violence.
Senator Fraser Anning wants to run it back with the Crusades, and I'm cool with that being in the history books. So he's a profoundly stupid person. I hope they vote him out.
Yeah.
I wish you could swear on this show, because I'm feeling the.
Yeah, that happens. Cenk has to restrain himself constantly. I just did a super brief, just because you brought up the history books. This killer in New Zealand's talking about an invasion, defending their land. Fraser Anning in Australia wants to defend their land from immigrants. How long do they think that people that look like them have been in Australia and New Zealand exactly?
Oh, right. Yes, there were others who wanted to defend their land in Australia earlier. And now, of course, they're also demonized.
Yeah.
How dare you be against immigrants? That's our job. Okay, last thing, guys. It's actually relatively easy to keep straight who you should be concerned about. It's not based on the religions, it's based on the fundamentalists. The fundamentalists are the ones that say, oh yeah, it is literal. We must go murder the other side because that's what's in all of our texts. Those are the ones you gotta look out for. Two easy ways to follow the Young Turks. One is hit the subscribe button down below, then you're a TYT subscriber. And second is ring the bell. And when you do that on YouTube, you're notified of our videos.